This is my solution for tip calculator, so let's just begin. So I provided you guys with this little template. This is my algorithm that I would use. So first I would try to get the name. So I use raw input and I ask for the name of the server. And I put a space there because I know that I'm going to want a space in the output. We'll be able to see that in a minute. First though, we now know about modules, so I'm going to import OS and then do OS system clear. Next, what we want to do is we want to ask for how much the meal was. So I'm just going to call that price. And just to make it look nice, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to tell them, typically we wouldn't do that in a program, just because that's kind of silly to make them do that. But this is what I wanted you guys to do. So we wanted to store that as an integer. So we have to, since raw input returns a string, we have to turn that into an int. So there's the special function we talked about last time called int that you can parse. That's the word we use. We can parse the stuff inside, which will be raw input, as an integer. So now price is an integer. Now we want to ask for how much the tax is going to be, which should be a floating point. So I'm going to call this tax and raw input. So and that's going to be a percentage, right? So, and this one similarly, we have to put float around it. We have to parse that as a float. Now we want to ask for the percentage of the tip. So this should also be an integer. And this is something that I wanted you guys to do, and I noticed some of you did it. So we want to save this in a variable tip, and we will want that to be an integer right off the bat. And then we'll say how much do you want to tip? And again, as an integer. And that will be an int. But we want our tip. So since they're going to give us an integer like 15 or 20%, that's not actually how that's represented. Tips are percentages, and percentages are actually just decimals. So what we need to do is we need to say tip equals tip divided by 100, right? Now that's going to be a percentage, or a decimal. So now what we can do is we can say print out the name of the server and the total amount you will pay. So we'll print name and we'll print a message. Good evening. And since name is already a string, we can just concatenate those with no problem, right? We can use the plus operator there. Then we can also print the amount of the meal. So what would the amount of the meal be? So we would get price times tax. That's going to give us the taxed amount. We're going to add that to price, right? And we also want to add the tip, and we're going to do a tip on the full amount. And since we have an order of operations here that's specific, we want to put parentheses around those. So we do price plus price times tax. And you notice we don't have to put any parentheses. sorry, we don't have to put any parentheses around price times tax because that's going to happen first anyway because of this order of operations. And then what we want to do is we want to add, or I'm sorry, multiply that by our tip amount. And then finally, we want to add that to price again. Okay, so we have the price of our meal plus the price plus price times tax, and then that's multiplied, sorry, by the price with the tax times the tip, which will give us the price. So if we wanted to save that, which is a good idea to do, we could say total equals, and then just put this up here. And then instead of doing all this, we'll just print the total. Okay, so that would be how I would solve this. Let's run it and see if it works. So we'll do so we want them to press enter to quit, and then when they're done, I want to clear the screen again. Okay, let's run this. So tip, must not have that. Tip calculator.py. What is the name of your server? George Bush. What was the price of your meal as an integer? Well, it was $23. How much tax will you be paying as a float? We'll be paying 6.5, because that's what it is in Utah. How much do you want to tip as an integer? I didn't put a float there or a question mark. I want to tip 20%. That's how much I always do. And it says, good evening, George Bush, $23. And that is not right. So let's see what we did wrong. Alright, so a couple things here. First, I'm just going to fix my prompt because I like clean output. Second thing is, we're using price here a lot, and price is changing, right? So we've got we've got the tax amount. We've also got the tip amount. So we should probably calculate those separately. So let's do that. Let's do price times tax, and then our tip amount equals price plus plus tax amount. And that is multiplied by our tip, and now our total is different now. So now it is price plus tip amount, tax amount, sorry, plus tip amount. Okay, so that should be our total. And now when we print out total, and I want to do this in a message as well, so let's do that. So we'll say the total price of my meal is, and remember, we can't just add total, because total is actually going to be probably a float. So we just need to turn that into a string before we want to concatenate it. Okay, that's important. So let's try running that one. Okay, what is the name of your server? We'll have it be Barack Obama. What is the price of your meal as an integer? 23. How much tax will you be paying as a float? 6.5. And how much do you want to tip as an integer? We tip 20. Good evening, Barack Obama. The total price of my meal is $172.50. So also doesn't seem to be right. So let's look at it again. What's wrong? Alright, so one thing we also failed to do is if we're asking for tax as a float, we should say, so I wasn't giving it as a float, so I guess this should be fine as long as I give it as a float. So Barack Obama, $23, and this is going to be 0.065, which is something I should have been doing, but forgot about that. How much do you want to tip as an integer? We want to pick 20. Good evening, Barack Obama. The total price of my meal is $24.495. There we go. So we could also do something a little bit, if we wanted it to be nicer. We don't pay 3 decimal places in money. We only have 2. So what I could actually do, this is extra credit. So you can actually round off the value, so we can round the total to 2 decimal places. Let's try that. And tip 20. There we go. Total price of my meal is $24.50. So that is how you would do the tip calculator.